Okay. Righto, so our family business has been, this is its 80th year. I'm a third generation operator of that business. I still remember my father saying, this business is not for anyone really to be in. It's not a viable business, and he shielded us away from it. He died suddenly 32 years ago yesterday, and that brought us to a decision, and I was the one that took the decision to come into the business. And he was right. It's a difficult show, but we've had a crack, and certainly in what I've learned, I'll just try and be as quick as I can. What I've learned over my journey is we've grown from a smaller business through a medium business to a larger business in terms of what we do in the state. We cover the entire state from the Kimberley to Esperance, and we have business relationships from one end to the other in every configuration known to man. I was previous president of the Livestock and Rural Transporters Association, and I've been fortunate enough to sort of live in lots of little boxes and also drive a truck and learn how to cart cows and stuff like that. So I believe I've got a funny a vantage point that's a bit unique because of the people we deal with, which are a lot of rural people. We've got 2,500 customers that we deal with, that we all talk to, and I've employed about 80 drivers over my time and things like that. So from everyone's perspective, I think I can. My aim is to try and see what everyone would like. So in our business, it's become evident that our viability is in question, and the industry's viability in question. Hence why we're here. So I guess that's me, and that's why I'm here. Do you want me to just go on with mine?
Look, I do want you, because John, you and I have worked together on and off many years on issues. But I think that what we have seen in the industry, and I think we agree here, the squeeze is just becoming tougher and tougher and tougher. Regulations getting more and more and more. What do we need to do to put the industry back on keel so we can be, and you can be, not me, I've never cut a stock, but safe, sustainable, viable and profitable? What needs to be done? What would you want from government?
Well, I think one of the major levers is the way customers can, or anybody can buy a truck, if you like, and get the benefit of buying a truck. It's basically to drive the market down, customers can do that. And they do. Customers own their own trucks, and they run them at cost or zero. As well as running them for zero, they can apply market leverage in all sorts of places to get their customers, and not just in livestock. I'm talking generally. This is my view of the transport industry, not the livestock industry. There's always that view that people will think that they can do it themselves for cheaper, whether it be a farmer or a multinational. They can think they can do it for cheaper. They probably can't, but the reality is the numbers would stack up to say they get a benefit. And part of that benefit is because the government allows non-core transport operators, it's not their core business, to buy trucks, and they enjoy the operating benefits of tax relief and depreciation and the like. So that running at zero for a customer who buys his own truck is actually a healthy investment to make, because it can offset some of their profit that they make in their core business. So I think that's one thing that needs to be. If you took that away, customers, I'm talking about the non-core transport people, would think twice about doing it, because it would shift that balance away from, geez, I don't think I'll do that. I won't get my own truck. There's no real benefit. So I'd encourage the government to consider some mechanism for people to identify what their core business is. And certainly in our transport sector, we've all talked about licensing transport companies and all that sort of stuff, and I don't think that's the answer by a long way. The underlying problem is this ability for someone to push the rate down to a very small margin, if not zero or better, and get a benefit from it, while we can't try and get the rate up. And I've watched the rate try and go up over the years, and it doesn't. It doesn't. Everyone tells the same story: low margin, high risk. Why is that? Well, there's a ceiling built in there with the way people can purchase trucks and can get a benefit for their business from them. So that's one.
Okay.
That's one.
Yeah. I want you to keep going.
The other way is that, I suppose painting a picture of what the transport industry looks like. I don't know what the government thinks about transport too much. I don't know whether they afforded a lot of time to understand it. which is a really crazy thing given it's a $50 billion industry. Relying on the bureaucrats to understand what transport's about is a waste of everybody's time, because they don't even try to understand what transport is. They don't consider, the bureaucracy doesn't consider themselves to be in the transport industry, which is just terrible. And they treat us like we're a second-class citizen. So to get to understand our transport industry, just a little thumbnail sketch, and I'm not sure whether everyone appreciates the 80-20 rule. I used to think that 80% of the freight would have been done by 20% of the operators. Would you think that's a normal?
You would think that, yeah, if you were outside.
It's actually not that way around at all. It's actually 80% of the freight gets done by 80% of the operators. 20% of the freight gets done by the big end of town, which is the top 20%, which is, when you start thinking about it like that, the amount of power that the bigger operator are given because of this 80-20 rule that we think it is. And the reasoning behind that is that, so out of that $50 billion worth of freight, 10 billion gets done by the top 20%, which is the multis and the big guys. And the other 40 billion gets done by people like me.
Yep.
And there's 40,000 of us. There's 50,000 operators. There's about 40, I think it's 40, there's 48,000 businesses, I think, in Transport in Australia. That's what I've learned. Now, I defy anyone in the government who's got some power, and when I say the government, I mean in the bureaucracy as well, to understand that. So why aren't we making decisions for 80% of the people to make sure there's 80% profitability and that there's not 20% thought about every time a decision's made? They're just 20. So it's and I've lived through these things a lot, and I've wondered why things don't happen. All the best ideas seem to go to water. You know, we've had 4 incarnations of reform process. The latest one being the NHVR.
Yep.
Prior to that, there was the National Transport Commission. Prior to that was Austroads. And no one's got rid of any of those, but they've all gone the same way. They don't understand. They don't want to understand. So in order to fix our problems, there has to be some understandings of what we live, how we live and how we operate, rather than listening to a very small sector of the community by people who don't have to worry about our community. So I think that's an inherent problem. I think we need to be taken seriously, and a serious industry is $50 billion worth of freight. And the add-on to that, you know, like our business transports $1 billion worth of product. We don't charge $1 billion.
No.
We're at the bottom end of the food chain in terms of charge, but $1 billion worth of our product in our community is transported by our little business. And yet I can't seem to think that we're overly viable, like my man said 35 years ago. We've got so that's a separate thing. So you've got that, and then the third thing is what seems to work well for lawyers is to have, and accountants is like, to have service agreements with their clients, where everyone signs up going in because they want to supply a service, and they want to supply a service and they want to take a service, if you like. So if you're the consumer, you're willing to sign up because you want that service, and if you're a service provider, you want to create the environment so that can be articulated before you do business. Now, I think across the transport industry, we're so generous, we're generous in our trust. Again, not livestock specific, across the mums and dads. But if we were protected by easy to provide, or someone's got to decide who's going to do, whether you do a periodic contract or you have a service agreement, or something has to change to give that customer-supplier relationship a bit of equality, because it doesn't have it now.
So, John, I'll come along this line, and this is the common trend that's going around. You know, take out a few niche sectors of the market. Predominantly, the message is loud and clear that the majority of transport representatives and associations and operators actually all agree on most of the stuff we agree on. You know, most of the issues are issues for all of us. The only difference is that as you said, governments don't take the industry seriously. Governments don't engage with the industry. So I've been very critical about this, because I believe this nation, this industry, seriously lacks a unified, united voice for the industry at all levels of government. I know the states and the state associations, it's not much better. It's really not much better. You may get an audience, but you don't get listened to. What's your thoughts around that? Well, that's my views.
Oh, look, I think you're 100% right. I think when you had that gathering we had at Canberra where we had that group, that was a very representative group. I think that was agreed on at that point, that we don't have a voice essentially. We met with Minister Buchholz. There was a delegation that went from that thing, which I was involved in, and he made the comment about the noise, white noise. There's all this white noise, you know. So there's groups for everything. But I don't think there's. I think there's too many groups. I think people are good at identifying the symptoms, and everyone has got their own view of what the symptoms are, no matter where you sit. Whether you're an owner-operator or you're an operator like myself or a driver or a contractor or whatever, everyone sees what they see and they think that's the problem. But I guess my aim is to try and see what everyone's problem are and try and group them into the disease, if you like. And I think not being taken seriously is because we've got, one of the reasons might be because we've got too many groups. If you try to amalgamate those groups, it's not going to make it any better, because that's always tried to happen. The state governments. So sorry, I wanted to flick off your point. Was a good point. So how do you get it from where we are now, so there's some meaningful progress? I actually put a bit of a blueprint together. In my time, which is sort of running out, I think on my bucket list is to see us a very viable and well-recognised industry. And I think there's ways to do that. I think you've got to have leadership. Some sort of task force is what I've sort of sketched out, that has direct contact, not with the bureaucracy, direct contact with the minister of the day.
So Minister's Advisory Group.
Yeah, a little different than that. That's generally put together by bureaucrats to make the decision-making look a bit more fuzzy. What I've seen, the West Australian system is the same. It's lived through 3 governments or 4 governments. There's a heavy vehicle advisory group in Western Australia.
I haven't heard a good word about that.
Well, you won't, because it was put there by Main Roads, who actually love playing our industry on a break.
You know, they refused to turn up today, Main Roads.
I wouldn't doubt that. I wouldn't doubt that. I've had a very long and interesting relationship with Main Roads.
I know you have.
But they treat us with disdain, and they treat certain operators almost unlawfully. In our case, we nearly went for them at malfeasance at a personal level, because that's what they did. And I think our industry could just about say there's always someone in a sector that's the one that they target. I don't think anyone would say that's not right. And there's others they let go and be cowboys. So they create an environment, and that's just the whole thing, what bureaucracy can do. So having a task force, not an advisory group, because that would get watered down or taken over, because I've seen those in the agriculture industry. I was on a ministerial group in the agriculture industry, and it was run by the department. Right. It needs to be run by a leader with some clout, and it needs to be talking to a minister who's got some passion about fixing the transport industry.
You've been reading my mail, John.
That's it. So that's that's how to fix it. Yep. Because any other way has been tried before. You know, I think to put it in the context of how our bureaucracy works and how the leadership is affected. Have I still got time?
You've still got time, because I want to hear, because you see, you have solutions, and the whole idea of this inquiry, and you weren't here early on. For those listening in the stratosphere, this inquiry was driven by industry. This wasn't a folly of Glenn Sterl. This was the industry saying we need to shine some very bright lights on some very dark corners so we can advise government how we need to go forward to keep this industry safe, sustainable, viable, and God help us, profitable. So and you touch on this, and I use the word task force too. I'd only just used advisory group today, and I asked you the question you've answered. But quite clearly, we've got to get the senior levels of government, ministers, actually conversing with industry.
One of the reasons,
and that's all levels of government.
Yeah, that's right. So just put it into context, and I've seen this happen, and I know this happens. So everyone gets to meet a minister at some point when they've got a problem. What not many people get to see is the briefing note that the minister gets. And in my time, when we had a major issue with Main Roads, we got them through FOI some of those documents. And
interesting.
And what was written about us in those documents that were handed to ministers would almost just about That's enough to would have been enough to fry people. There was the only thing that they wrote with any honesty was their title. The context of our issue, and I've done that at an industry level, and now, because I probably understand a little bit differently than I do. I once went to a briefing with a minister on an issue, and it was an industry issue which I was dealing with outside of the industry group, if you like. The minister was good enough to hand me the briefing document, and I said, well, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. So it sort of explained why for about 15 years, every time I sat in front of a minister with a problem and a solution, that the minister glazed over, about the first 10 minutes just to get the meeting done, is because they've got a briefing note in there saying this bloke isn't who he says he is, or this industry is divided. The opening line is the industry is divided on this issue. That's what I've seen enough of. So one of the things you can do without too much trouble is just make sure that every time a minister sits in a room with someone in the industry, is make sure that that's open document and you hand it across the table, because then they'd be careful about what they wrote and what lies they wrote.
Yeah. Senator McDonald, I know you're out there and you're on mute, and I'll give you the chance to demute, because as you would be aware, John and I could talk all day because all the problems are still the same. I don't think much has changed, whether we're talking fatigue management, whether we're talking the viability of the industry. So, Senator McDonald, did you have any questions for John before we run out of time?
Look, I think he's made an incredibly astute observation about briefing notes from departments, and I have seen that over years at a state level and a federal level. Departments are very keen to be very cautious, and so I think your comments on the briefing notes are insightful. It's not helpful. I look forward to meeting you in Canberra at a future occasion. I think you've raised a number of issues that will require further discussion. The only other thing I wanted to ask you about, given that we've talked about it quite a lot today, is apprenticeships. And if you think that is a way of introducing a more skilled workforce into the industry, what do you think about that suggestion?
I think the apprenticeship notion's a good one. I worry about where it ends up in some sort of training organisation that probably could be ticking a box and getting money. What I would say,
not a pastel-coloured classroom,
something
surely.
like that. I mean, I did when I did my trade. The TAFE system was good enough. My kids are doing trades now, and I worry about it. And it's not like it was. So I think there's if you don't mind, that just how it sort of plays out in reality is the old way's always been a great way to do it. You get a kid into your business and you get him washing trucks and you do this and you do that. And I think that you may have talked about that plenty, but there's certain organisations that have a habit and a knack of being able to produce people that are very good at what they do at a young age. And I think we see that over a lot of industries where if they've worked for such and such and they drove for them first, they'd be very, very good because they got good principles and good grounding. And conversely, it's true where you get the cowboy coming in and teaching people the wrong way straight away. And I've seen both of those circumstances. But just to put it into context, what we do, our business now, we fall into the payroll tax thing, which is West Australian government fight that we're going to have. My wife and I have decided to make sure that everyone knows that payroll tax is a blight and an extortion.
Absolutely.
What we train a number of our ex-employees work in our industry, and we've given them some skills and some grounding along the way with that. We've had to pay for that in terms of the time we've spent with them, and for the added privilege, we've got a payroll tax bill as well. The payroll tax bill probably is significant. The time we put into our people is significant. So I would probably answer your question, Senator, by saying the idea of training people, if there was a business that could supply or build people into great truck drivers and wanted to do that, I think they should be encouraged to do that. And I think they should be encouraged to do that without just ticking boxes and getting RTOs in and doing all this stuff. So there has to be some complementary behaviour. So what we're doing now is I think the way we're doing it, I want to get young kids in our business, and part of what they'll do is go to the driving schools through their
You're
classes.
talking entry level?
Yeah, entry level and any level. You know, there's got to be a way that we can go through and probably use a fragmented approach, which is probably the way I think of it. But the end game being to build someone's skills. So the apprenticeship, not so much. A method to get someone out and to be able to be assessed as a good operator, probably, and built by the operators themselves is a good way of doing it. And the other thing is, Senator, I'll tell you the craziest thing that I've come across. I've tried to go through the department over here about getting a license, a HR license extended to allow one more axle on a trailer, which is only a small, I don't want to get too technical, but basically for 2 tonne more payload, a kid can't work in our business at 18 when he gets a HR because of the 2 tonne payload he carts on the equipment we've got. And in the old vernacular, before we went to this national class of licences, that vehicle was the stable where everyone learned how to drive a livestock truck. That vehicle's the livestock truck training vehicle. So what we've got to do now is we're going to get a kid in at 18, he spends his money and gets his HR, can't drive that vehicle, doesn't get a job because he can't drive that vehicle. So he goes off and earns money, does whatever in the mine, and he's lost forever. When he gets that HR, he can drive a 150 tonne haul pack on a mine, and he can't drive a vehicle with 2 tonne more payload than the HR equivalent. So I've asked the department about that. I had a meeting down at home, got nothing, got nowhere. Last week in the rural press I went hard, and I'll get probably further behind the 8 ball because of it. But we need people wanting to be, gets back to my original point about people in our industry, the bureaucrats in our industry considering themselves in our industry and needing to help rather than give us some bullshit story why they can't do this and can't do that.
Yeah. Senator McDonald?
Thank you. I know we're out of time. We can continue this conversation another day.
All right, well, thanks very much. Thanks, Senator McDonald. John, thanks very much, mate. You and I will liaise about some timing to fly to Canberra, and we want to hear some more from you. Thanks very much for coming up. But just before you go, what's with the training centre down in Collie? This has been a fantastic announcement, hasn't it? We're going to turn out truck drivers.
Part of a story.
What is it?
Great idea, but it's part of a story. I think it's part of a story. Yeah, I think it's part of a story. I don't think it's the entire story.
Oh, all right. Okay.
I think it's a great idea, and I think it could. That's in my view. I would know that person could come out of there knowing more than he would be before he went in.
Right.
But I'd like it to be part of our process to get someone through that. You know what I mean? So part of the story.
All right. Well, I'll follow that closely and see how it goes.
It is. The idea is right. It's a
All
good
right.
idea. Thanks very much.
Thanks, John.